Erik Weihenmayer, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Hey, John.
Hey, man, it took us a little bit to get this thing off the ground, but the shuttle is now in the air. I am so thrilled to spend some time not only learning about your story, but sharing your story with our community. If you were forced, and I know you don't love bragging on yourself, but if you were forced to introduce yourself to our audience, and it started with your name, and then you had to describe who you are, what do you say next? So I'm Erik and
I'm Erik with an unpronounceable last name that used to be Weihenmayer, but now it's just Weihenmayer. It's been breaded, I think. So I don't know. It's very hard to describe myself, but I mean, I guess I'm an adventurer, an explorer. I'm a writer, speaker, like you, and it's a very eclectic, piece of life. In terms of like people even say, "How do you make a living?" And it's like, well, little speaking, little writing, a few endorsements. It's not an easy career to encapsulate.
when you're not working, because a lot of what you said right there has to do with either the quality, like adventurer, or the career, like
Yeah.
writer, speaker. When you're not working, describe yourself.
I love reading. I mean, when I say reading, I love listening to audiobooks and I love playing my guitar. For me, playing my guitar is so different than climbing and adventuring. It's like more meditative, just mind focus, heart focus. I love it so much. I'm training a lot, just out climbing. Like today is going to hit 50 in Colorado. So after this interview, I'll head out rock climbing all afternoon. And my partner and we just have a really good time. We go to movies, we go to documentary films, showings, lectures. We just like getting out, walking, and enjoying life. I'm trying to actually, this is a funny story. I'm so totally digressing, John, but I was speaking at a group the other day and they're like, "Oh, we're crushing it. We're doing so well as a company. And, I just need to get our team to keep sustaining and performing even better than they have the last 5 years, even though they've been record setting profits." And she said, "What's your goal in the future?" And I said, "Well, actually, in a weird way, I've been training and so goal oriented my entire life. One of my goals is to actually just like live more in the present and enjoy life. Like this summer, my partner and I, Heather, we're going to go to New Hampshire and sit on a cabin near this beautiful granite lake and kayak and swim and tandem bike every day with no goal, just enjoyment, just physical, just connection. So as I get older, it's a funny irony that I'm actually looking to, my goal is to maybe not always have a giant goal looming above me.
So
I hope
I'm
that's not
telling you,
demotivational.
it's not demotivational, it's life centric, man. One of the things we'll talk about as we unpack your story is how in the climb, it forces you to be less pursuant of the summit than of being highly present in the moment. What you're moving toward on a climb is actually what you're encouraging us to move toward in life,
Yeah.
which is not the summit, it's the moment. Like
Yeah.
that is all you got, man. I think what you preach is what you're practicing this summer. But I'm going to
Thank
take
you.
you back from the summer of 2026 in New Hampshire with your partner and force you to go back in time a little bit. You and I share some commonalities.
Oh my gosh, do we?
One of them is the fact that we had a great family growing up. You have like a really unusual dad at the very least. And I think you learned a lot about adventure and a lot about overcoming, a lot about service from your dad. Would you just talk to our audience about your
Yeah.
father?
Well, my heart goes out to you, John, because I know you lost your dad recently.
That's
I
right.
think that's the case, yeah. And I lost my dad 3 years ago. He was really my hero. I mean, he wasn't a perfect man. Know what he is, but he was just this guy who taught me how to walk the talk. He wore everything on his sleeve. He was unabashed about just pursuing the life he wanted, and he's fiercely loyal to his family.
Yeah.
And kind of has Weihenmayer traits. Like he was a little bit undersized, walk on at Princeton. He walked on to the football team. And then, just through hard work and perseverance and just like being hard headed, he became the captain of the Princeton football team. I think that a walk on never ever became a captain
Right.
of that team. And then then it was in the Vietnam War, that era, he graduated. And I think he really felt like it was so unfair that poor people and these young kids were getting drafted into the Vietnam War that he enlisted and became a Marine and had this really incredible career as a Marine. He flew A-4 Skyhawks over in Vietnam. And he just was like this guy who was always motivating, and like he had an incredibly demanding job working on Wall Street, up at 5 in the morning and on the train at 6 and 2 hours to get to the office and then 2 hours getting back home. And he would come back and he would never miss a wrestling match. I wrestled in high school and college, and he never missed a match. He was always there. And I always knew he was in the audience because he had this big booming voice, like, And so I always knew he was there. And he was just relentless. When he was dying, he was in the hospital, literally his last day on earth. He was trying to exercise in his hospital bed. He was trying to do bicycles with his legs. We're like, Dad, you can give it up, man, today.
Simplify.
Yeah, simplify. He was who he was to the last moment. Yeah.
I was thinking a lot about you and preparing for today. And like when I check into a hotel room, the very first thing I do is I flip the light switch on. And I feel very, 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 very lost until I find it. And then I started reflecting on times in my life when I've been unable to see. And I spent a couple months in the hospital bed, unable to see, but I was stagnant. And when you can't see and you can't move, it's less scary than when you can't see, but you can move. So then I thought about this time when I was like 11 and woke up with like some kind of infection in my eyes, and they were locked shut at first. And I remember running and tripping into my mom and dad's room, and panic struck.
Yeah.
Like I can't see, Mom. I can't open up my eyes. And they eventually cleared them out, and I could. It was fine. Man, you went through a period in your childhood where it went from being somewhat unable to see to being completely unable to see. And I'm just curious, now looking back on it, what was that progression toward blindness like for a little kid experiencing it?
Awesome question. So I was born legally blind. That means I could see a little bit in my right eye, but it's a legal definition, meaning what you would see from 200 feet away, I would see from 20 feet away. So I'd have to get 20 feet close to someone to be able to see what you'd see from 200 feet away. And then I progressively, that disease, it's called retinoschisis, and it got worse and worse. And in middle school, it started getting really bad. And so what essentially is happening in layman's terms is my retinas were unraveling because of high pressure in my eyes. And so every day I'd wake up with different diminished sight. And so every day was like a new day. I'd wake up to like a new level of vision. And,
Right.
I remember in middle school it was really scary. I'd go out on the playground and I'd look and I couldn't find the building, like how to get back to the classroom or walking to the bus stop. I remember as I was going blind, there were all these like shadows and things like that. And they were dancing all around in my vision. I could barely make it to the bus stop. So yeah, it was terrifying. And when I went blind for real, like totally blind, it was a week before my freshman year in high school. Not very good timing. It was just like getting hit in the head with a baseball bat. I was just crippled, and I felt like everything was starting over, everything was ending. And so I had to be led from class to class, being led to the bathroom, led to the cafeteria. That's not either another way of being popular in school. When your aide is leading you around the first few days of high school. And I was very uncomfortable with blindness because I didn't want to be blind, and I didn't want people to look down on me because I was so uncomfortable with myself. Everyone else was uncomfortable too, right? And it is like a little bit of a lesson now that I look back so long ago. People do reflect you like a mirror. If you're confident and feel comfortable in your own skin, then people will usually reflect that. But I was so uncomfortable. I was so on guard, so defensive, so my like back against the wall, that anytime anyone tried to help me, I'd just like lash out like a little snarling raccoon. And so I just was like creating alienation to myself, and just felt like I was in this dark room and there was a locked door, and I just wanted to break out of that room so bad and live. I mean, going blind was scary, but that was secondary to living a full life. Like I wouldn't have described it back then, but I mean, I remember in the cafeteria, kids are having food fights and telling jokes and laughing and just having good time, and I'm like stuck over here in this place, and I wanted to be a part of the world. It wasn't easy, you know, and you asked how did I handle it? Well, I think I handled it like the way most people would handle that. um, I wasn't remarkable in any other way. I denied it, and then I got super angry, and then I, got a little down. But I just had this feeling that like there was a ceiling that I wanted to just bash my head through and get through that barrier. And I had no idea how I would do it, and I had no idea how to see through that brick wall to the other side.
Gosh. Well, the obvious next question is,
And that's probably similar to your story too, I would imagine.
well, as you were talking, I'm like, I think he's giving away my bio because I spent less time worried about being burned and scarred and more time worried about being different and less than.
Yeah.
And as I read your story, it's the same deal. Like, yeah, no kid wants to be blind. Every kid wants to be able to see, but even greater, the fear of being less than and left out.
And be left out. Yeah. And this is not my story necessarily, because a lot of blind people and disabled people, they talk about this idea that the real barrier was being shoved to the sidelines into this dark place and being left there and being forgotten. And I always think about that, like, that's what you and I think, and so many others who are kindred spirits are trying to do, help people live fully, whatever that means for them, and not be camping, not being on the sidelines, listening to life go by, saying, I'm a spectator in my own life. I think you call it an accidental life.
Yeah. So in your life, what began to change that from the kid who was led by the aide to the cafeteria where he heard food fights to eventually this man who summits the highest mountains in the world, teaching others to grab onto life? Like what was that first turning point for you in high school or shortly afterwards?
Yeah. Well, my dad, as we mentioned, amazing, just so steady and consistent, love. And here's the funny thing. My dad never said, I loved you. He never said, I love you. And he didn't even hug that much, but he showed his love through his actions. He's that typical man of the, 50s, 60s, 70s. And so my mom tragically was killed in a car accident like a year after I went blind.
Yeah.
So my dad stepped it up, and he was just so supportive, like even to the point like calling me and saying, hey, take the fish sticks out of the freezer and like start thawing them for dinner because he's going to be home at 7 and let's have some fish sticks, I mean, just very simple things like that, I had great teachers. I had this amazing guidance counselor, Mrs. Reddy. She knew I was so closed in and not willing to talk about going blind and the pain of that she said to me, hey, I know you don't like talking much about what you've experienced, what you've gone through. She said, but like at lunch hour, I'm just here hanging out, eating lunch, and I'll keep my door open. And I know your dog, it's kind of hot in the hallways, and your guide dog, my seeing eye dog, she gets thirsty, and come on in. I'll have a water bowl. I'll have a bowl filled with water at my office, and just come in and sit down and think of it as a respite. And then I would sit down. Sure enough, we would fall into these incredibly deep conversations where it was therapy, but I didn't know it at the time, because I wouldn't have wanted that. And so, and teachers to the point where they're like, hey, I know your mom's gone. I know you can't drive. Here, if you need a ride to the doctor's office or a vet appointment for your dog, I'll give you a ride. Really, really beautiful community. And I realized how privileged I was. Like I grew up in this community of support. And so I really think about that all the time, how privileged and how fortunate and how lucky I was. You're going blind, that's tragic, of course, but to be in the community that I was in America was like winning the lottery.
Mm. You're going blind, you end
Yeah.
up fully blind, your mother dies in a car accident, and I just hear that teenage kid say to me, and I realized how privileged I was and how lucky I was, and to be in this community and to have these guidance counselors. And those two things don't seem to gel up. I mean, most teenagers, If they have a pimple, it's pretty tragic. And if they don't get brought to prom by the right date, it could be the end of it all. And here's this kid who has every reason in the world to say life is grotesquely unfair. And you're describing your life as blessed.
Yeah.
You understand?
But John, I mean, like, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm pretty damn human. Like this morning, technical difficulties getting on this podcast. I was behaving abominably. I was panicking and like I was like, we can't get this damn thing working. Brr. You know, my poor partner is like trying to figure it out. And so I have moments, right? Like I have these moments of impatience and just feeling sorry for myself and angry. So these are things that like there's never like an end goal. There's never a summit where you're now healed and cured, right? Like so I have those moments. But yeah, no, I do I do feel absolutely grateful. And kind of I guess that was made a little bit clearer when one of our No Barriers events, we had the speaker Ice-T. You might remember him. He's like a rapper
Yes.
and an actor, and he told this story, and he said he looked out at the audience. He goes, "I see a lot of physically disabled people, amputees, and people in wheelchairs, and people who are blind, and so forth." And he goes, "I carry a wheelchair in my soul because when I was a kid," he said, nobody cared whether I lived or died. Nobody cared about me. Like I had no parents, nobody telling me I should operate as a boy, as a man, you know, what I should be growing towards. Nobody cared. He goes, I learned all that on the streets. And he goes, so I'm disabled in a way. And I thought that was when it hit me. And I went, yeah, it's totally right. Like I went blind, but I was so freaking lucky to be in the place that I was when I went blind. If I was in Gaza or if I was in someplace like that, you know, life would have been tragically so different. And so I don't know quite how to reconcile that except just to feel lucky.
Mm. One of the things you've done so many remarkable things in your life, and yet one of the things that impresses me most is you become a school teacher.
Yeah.
Even this morning, I'm just utterly blown away by that. Talk about this desire for a kid moving on to school and saying, "Yeah, I think I'll become a middle school teacher."
Well, there's a funny phenomena that I think I should study at some point. Like my friend Harlan Tanny, who is an amazing kayaking guide that helped me guide kayak down the Grand Canyon. He was the one in the radios yelling directions at the top of his lungs. And when he was a little boy, his dad, I think he had epilepsy or something, and he died and in the shower. And Harlan found him in the bathtub, like underwater, drowned. Like just looked down at this, so like his dad, blue face, you know, just he had deceased in the bathtub. And then Harlan, for some reason, you know, would think he would be terrified of water, but it drew him somehow closer, and he became this world-class kayaker. And that's the most bizarre thing, right? In humans. So connecting that back to my life, yeah, I went through hell in middle school, right? Like that was the worst time of my life, maybe. So why would I turn to middle school teaching? You turn towards something instead of away from it. I realized that that's 4 years of really potential hardship for kids, and so I wanted to be there and be a mentor, and I thought it was a place I could make an impact. So yeah, I became a middle school teacher. I taught English and math, and I absolutely loved it and could have done that forever, actually.
What changed? You did it for 6 years. You could have done it forever, but for some reason you stop.
I just got this wild hair that I could make a life in the mountains as a climber. I had climbed Denali in 1995. That's ancient history now. And then the next summer, I trained to climb
Erik,
Mount.
before you go to the next summer, then into '01 and the things you do that year, and then progress on from there, like why Denali? Like man, like the reality is, I have a neighbor who struggles with sight, and when I see him cross the sidewalk, I want to help. Like
Yeah,
that's how I feel, and I think he doesn't need my help, but
sure.
I see
But
him
that's
out
the
there.
friendship.
I want to walk with Bill across the street.
Yeah.
Denali. seems ridiculous, man, for a guy who can't see his hand in front of him, let alone the next crevice and the next and the next and the next and the next. Where does the idea of climbing come from?
Okay, so back up. Another amazing story about my dad. I couldn't play ball sports in the 80s, like a kickball and baseball, those things I loved. I loved basketball. I got slammed in the face so many times. And I realized that just this was not going to happen, and I had to let those things go in a way. And so there was a recreational program for blind kids at the Carroll Center for the Blind out of Newton, Massachusetts. And so from Connecticut, once a month, my dad would drive me up to the Carroll Center, 3 hours, and I would embark on these adventures. And we'd go tandem biking and fishing, horseback riding, canoeing, sailing. One weekend, they took us rock climbing. And I was a physical kid because I was a wrestler. I was light and kind of skinny and a little muscly, well, more stringy muscles. But I found that the experience of rock climbing, feeling my hand and feet across the face as, using them as eyes, it was this beautiful, tactile, full body, mind and body and spirit experience that just like engaged me, like in this sense of adventure that I thought I had lost. I just thought like adventure's gone for me. Like I'm going to be on the sidelines for my life. And so rock climbing was this kind of weird moment where I realized like the adventure of my life is just beginning. And I always wanted to get back to that feeling. And so when I moved out to Arizona as a teacher, I started rock climbing. I joined the Arizona Mountaineering Club. And you would think, oh, this organization, blind guy shows up. They're going to be like, no, you can't do this. No, it wasn't like that at all. They welcomed me with open arms. They taught me. They took me under their wing. They mentored me. It was an incredible experience of great people. And then there was a substitute teacher at my school who was a climber, and he said, hey, let's get out. And we'd play on the weekends, and we started climbing a ton. And the one day, and it's funny because this guy had attention deficit disorder, so his mind didn't really work in this linear way.
Right.
He's like, hey, we should try something bigger. Like, I'll never forget this. We should try something bigger. And I'm like, what, bigger? Like, what do you mean, like a bigger rock face? He goes, no, Denali. I'm like, what? Like, I don't even know what does that even mean? Like,
Right.
where is that? And I was only like, I'd only camped out as a Boy Scout or as a Weeblo or something. So I didn't even know like how to set up a tent. Anyway, so we went for the next year, just training and going around and climbing everything on the weekends, like from Mount Rainier to Mount Hood to Mount Humphreys, which is the tallest peak in Arizona, Long's Peak. Here's the funny thing. We didn't summit anything. We didn't get to the top of anything. We fell short on everything we tried. And we decided, because again, this guy's mind didn't work in a linear way. He said, let's go to Long's Peak in the winter. Long's Peak is this 14,000-foot peak in Colorado. And I'm like, in the winter? And he's like, yeah, because it'll simulate Denali in Alaska. I'm like, okay, cool. We went there, 100-mile-an-hour winds just hammered us. Like we could barely stand up. We thought the tent was going to get ripped away. And the next morning, we somehow got our gear. I'd lost like stuff that had blown away. Like my goggles, I remember, had just literally gotten blown out of my hand. I couldn't hear Sam in this horrible windstorm, wind picking us up and slamming us back down against the ground. And he took out an old piece of webbing and he connected our packs together so that I could actually follow him on a rope. And we limped out of the mountains. Oh, and Sam had lost a snowshoe, which I thought was funny because one of his feet were just like sinking like 2 feet down into the snow every time he'd take a step, and it was just miserable. And we got down to the parking lot and my eyelids, I remember, were frozen together. And I had to de-thaw them in the heat of the car. But I remember, this is just weird, but I mean, it is, I guess, a bit of mindset, but that should have been the experience that said, like, look, you guys are so out of your league. But I thought, like, Sam and I thought differently. We thought, like, hey, if we can survive this and we can take care of each other in this insane situation, then we may not summit Denali, but we're going to be okay. We're going to give it a try. And so it's like that moment when you're standing on the beach and you put your toe in that cold water, and you're like, I don't know. And then you just plunge in. That moment was just absolutely plunging in and said, we're going to do this. So Sam and I, after 19 days on Denali, hardest thing I'd ever done, reached the summit of Denali. We found out later, so weird, Helen Keller's birthday when we stood on.
Wow, man.
And so it was beautiful. And I've told this story a few times, so it's a little bit silly, but the cool thing was that my dad and my two brothers, they were above us in a plane watching us take our last steps because
Gosh.
we had radioed down to the base camp manager who radioed out to Talkeetna, and they were waiting on a runway, and they took off in this single otter plane, and they were flying above us, circling around the summit, looking down at these 5 red suits. And we all looked identical to each other, and we're waving our ski poles at the plane. And I said to my buddy Sam, I said, hey, do you think they're going to know I made it? Because, I know we look all the same. And he said, yeah, they're going to know you're the one waving your ski pole in the wrong direction. So, yeah, my friends, it's a beautiful camaraderie. Excuse my language, they bust your balls a lot. And that's fun, you know what I mean? Just because, it's not mean spirited. It's like, it's teasing to create connection. Sometimes dudes have to do that because it's hard to say, I love you.
Erik, when did you realize that you weren't just climbing for adventure or for ego or for self, but for your partners, your teams, your community, the blind community, and a world that is looking up for a vision in their lives? Like when did it become bigger than just you having a weekend climb?
Well, I've always connected my climbs to these bigger causes and organizations. Denali was sponsored by the American Foundation for the Blind. They're a wonderful advocacy organization, and they wanted to use the climb to as just to promote a positive image of blindness. And I'm gonna get this wrong a little bit, but I was on this advertising campaign. And some people may not even remember this, but sometimes, way long ago, blind people would be on the corner selling pencils. And so their slogan was blind people, they don't just sell pencils. And it was me standing on the summit of Denali. So that was really beautiful to be part of that kind of positive message. And then when I climbed Everest, same thing. The National Federation of the Blind sponsored us. That's an advocacy organization of blind people. That's about 50,000 blind people.
Wow.
Most of whom, by the way, are unemployed. I think almost 80% of working age blind people are unemployed. Can you imagine that? I mean, in the Depression, that's a higher unemployment rate than the Depression. And that's the way blind people live. So they're doing car washes and bake sales to raise $200,000 to get me and my team to the summit of Everest. And when I stood there,
do you feel the pressure that,
yeah, of course.
that not only are you taking, you're taking a profound risk and a ton of training and months and months and months away from home and living in misery and squalor.
Yeah.
And there are people washing cars so that you can do this for them.
Yeah, and the president of the National Federation of the Blind was really like the super frank, like abrupt kind of guy. And he said, hey, are you going to climb this the way everyone else climbs the Mount Everest? And he said, because if you're going to get dragged to the top in some kind of token type way and spiked on top like a football, then we probably don't want to be a part of this. And I said, no, I'm going to climb it the way everyone climbs it. I will have a great team around me. And he said, getting a blind person to the top of Mount Everest is sort of like America getting a person to the moon. It's, it'll just change the image of blindness. It'll give this incredible facelift in a way. And so anyway, yes, I did feel the pressure, but I felt like I was standing on the shoulders of so many people who had helped me get there. And when I got back down, I came to this conference for the National Federation of the Blind, and they announced that, and thousands of blind people all stood up and they cheered, and that was amazing, just so powerful. But when you're climbing, you're right, you have to have this kind of compartmentalizing attitude where you're like, yes, I'm doing this for other people, but I can't have like camera courage where I'm going to do stupid stuff just because I know so much is riding on this. You have to be safe. You have to be smart and sort of just be in the moment and climb and make good decisions. Otherwise, you're going to be in big trouble.
So, man, I'm curious. I spent the majority of my life trying not to be identified with the burn community.
Yeah.
That's not a knock against them. It's more of a knock against myself. I wanted to pretend like I was normal and as able-bodied and as capable as anybody else. And so I ran away from that community. And it's only over time that I've recognized the ability to live in and elevate that community to an extent. As you were going through your experience of climbing and then ultimately summiting Everest and then getting a standing ovation, had that been a community you pushed away for a while? And regardless of the answer to that, and was that your favorite standing ovation you've ever received?
Of course it was. Oh my gosh, was it? It was so beautiful. But yeah, same as you. I grew up in this community, and I was the blind guy, and I was exceptional. Look at Erik, look at the blind guy wrestle, look at the blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, you fall into that trap. And so when my dad actually maybe my mom was alive at this point, she said you should go to this blind camp and learn how to use a cane
Yeah.
and learn how to navigate and learn Braille and learn how to use computers with voice synthesizers. I said, I don't want to be around a bunch of blind dorks. Like, no way. And they kind of forced me into it. And I went and I loved it because I know it sounds so stereotypical, but I realized these are kids. We're all just kids, it was beautiful. I found like this connection, right? Like I met a young lady whose parents, they wouldn't let her use the word blind because if she said the word blind, she would be giving in to this idea of blindness. So they made her deny it. They made her deny this experience of what she was going through. Another kid, I remember, we went swimming at the YMCA, and he said, Erik, I've never put my head under the water. And I said, why? And he goes, because my parents told me if I go under the water, then I won't know how to get to the surface again because I'm blind. And I'm like, what? I'm like, dude, you'll float to the surface. That's preposterous.
Right.
And so I think I meanly shoved his head under the water. And he like popped up like laughing, like, yeah, you're right. And so that it was beautiful.
So, Erik, one more question from Mount Everest, and then I want to get us off that mountain. But I have a friend, you share him with me, Jeff Prouty. You know Prouty pretty well.
Yeah.
I asked him what question should I ask Erik, and one of the questions he put in front of me was ask him about something funny that happened on Mount Everest. So it's ironic to even think about humor on a mountain of agony, but was there any humorous moments from your experience on Mount Everest?
That's one of the reasons I love climbing is that it's like you're just in summer camp again, except it's very cold. So it's like winter camp, and you're just having so much fun. You're back and forth. You're just exhausted from like teasing each other and having so much fun but also lifting each other up at the same time, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. And I had an amazing team. I remember one day I was coming down the mountain because Everest, you don't climb it up and down in one shot. You actually go up and down the mountain in increments as you acclimatize. And so we were coming down the mountain and somebody waved to my friend who was walking in front of me, and they made the sign like, hey, is he sick? Like what's wrong with him? Because I don't walk in a normal way. Like I'm leaning on these poles. Like people say I look like a giant insect, like a praying mantis with these antennas out in front of me with these trekking poles. And I'm feeling every step as I walk, but it's in like fast motion. And my friend laughed and he said, oh no, he's not sick. He's blind. He always looks like that. So yeah, there's always humor going on, usually at my expense, but I like it.
When you made it to the top, what's the emotion you feel? I mean, you're doing something that very, 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 very few people in the world have ever done or will ever do. It's extraordinarily difficult and dangerous. And you made it. As the first ever blind summiter, you made it to the top of Everest, the top of the world. What's that like for you looking out from that perspective?
Well, I think this is probably a very dissatisfying answer, but when you get to the summit of a mountain, you are not there. You have not arrived. The Sherpas say you're only halfway there, right? Because you got to get down alive. And that's the most important part. 90% of accidents happen on the way down. So again, you're doing this compartmentalizing thing where maybe 20% of you is just elated and can't believe it and celebrating and crying and hugging and just, like it's almost like non-belief that you've actually achieved this thing. And the other 80% is like, no, man, this is business. I got to get down, and every step counts. Every step till base camp, right? It's not over. And when you're walking uphill, if you fall, maybe you fall onto the slope. If you fall going down, you're tired. You trip over your crampons, which are the points that you wear on your feet. Maybe it snags a pack loop or your pants or something. You're taking a tumble, right? So you don't have to be the greatest athlete. You just have to stay incredibly focused, right? And just focus on every step. Nothing matters except the next step.
How does that apply in life? It's relatively obvious, but knowing that the majority of my audience don't like getting the mail in the afternoon because it's too far away from their front door, and then you're now translating the hike down Everest back to safety and sanity into taking the next right step. That's all that matters, the next right step. How does that apply to our lives?
Well, I don't know if I learned it. Maybe I learned it from my dad and my mom and just my family, the way I grew up. But I've always been fortunate to be able to understand, like, okay, you put this massive goal ahead of you, but now you have this thing that seems kind of impossible. But to get there, it's one step at a time. And so, yeah, you create the map, but
Right.
then it's one step at a time, and focus relentlessly on the next step, right? Because without that next step, you're not going to take the third step or the fourth step. So, yeah, I've been able to just say, okay, what at this moment is the most important thing that's going to get me to that goal? So I think there is kind of a relentless sort of focus, understanding, prioritizing, like what is most important. And I've also often been accused of like slacking on the things that aren't important to me,
Mm.
which can be a problem, but like it's a double-edged sword, right? Like if you just don't have the capacity to focus on everything.
Right.
So yeah, I just focus on the things that are really important to me and let other stuff go. Sometimes, in a way to my demise.
Eric, you step off the mountain and you're globally famous. I've interviewed a bunch of folks on this podcast and know a bunch just through my work as a speaker who seek fame. Like they that's what they wanted and they got it. Good for them. You've never struck me as the type of guy who clamored for it at all. It just showed up on your doorstep. How'd you manage becoming world famous? Like what's that like for you, a guy who wasn't seeking that?
When I was wrestling, and I was a pretty good wrestler, and I was winning a lot of tournaments and getting trophies and things like that, I remember my dad one time saying, you know, I want you to understand something. I don't really care as a parent if you break records. He said, I just want you to live a fulfilling life.
Hmm.
So, in the pursuit of living a fulfilling life, yeah, things happened. And yeah, when I got back from Everest, it was crazy, like I'm on the cover of Time magazine and nobody even knows what that is anymore, but I think it's still around. And all these, and life changed. But Pasquale, who is our team leader,
Yes.
he is an amazing human. He's still an amazing human. He pulled me aside after I'd gotten down to base camp. I thought he was going to like hug me and celebrate and like, hey, sign my baseball cap. And instead he said, Eric, your life is about to change, but do me a favor. He said, don't let Everest be the greatest thing you ever do.
Oof.
I just remember thinking like, or saying to BV, like, that's really bad timing, dude. Like I'm exhausted. I've lost a ton of weight. I just want to go home. I want to drink lattes. I want to eat chocolate croissants. I want to walk on a sidewalk that doesn't kill me. Like this is really bad timing for this advice. And so, and I was thinking in my mind, like, of course, like what could be better? What could be higher than this? And what he was saying was, because I took a long time to process it, in those months after Everest. He said, you come home, you put your trophies on the shelf, you hang your pictures on the wall, and then that room becomes your mausoleum.
Mm.
And he's saying, like, hey, it's okay to celebrate. Like, there's nothing wrong with celebrating, but don't get mired in this idea of like, okay, now my ego is locked in.
Yes.
I'm this guy, and I'll never take another risk again because that threatens the ego, this very fragile identity that I've now created in my life, right? He's saying, like, move forward, celebrate along the way, but like, this isn't to get famous or to rest on your laurels. This is to create more learning, more impact
Mm.
uh, in your life. And he's like, don't waste this experience because these experiences are all catalysts
Yes.
to more growth. And so that's the way I look at it, right? Like I look at these experiences as catalysts to growing and connecting and making sort of some meaning in your life.
Man, that's such a beautiful answer. I've always respected mountain climbers,
Yeah.
obviously, but I far respect even more the Sherpas.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And I mean that both literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
I think there's just something so beautiful about humbly carrying up someone else's equipment or grabbing their hand and showing them the way. And one of the things that impresses me most about you, Eric, is not what you did on Everest, it's what you've done since. Talk a little bit about No Barriers. What's that organization? What's that foundation about?
I will. But by the way, before we move there, I'll tell you a quick story about the Sherpas. So we needed a Sherpa team.
On the chance our audience doesn't know, what is a Sherpa?
A Sherpa are the local people that live in the Khumbu region of Nepal in this high valley. And they, since the beginning of Westerners climbing Himalayan peaks like Everest, they've been the support team, carrying gear, doing the hard work, taking the highest risks. And now the Sherpas have become leaders in their own rights. They're no longer just supporting, they're guiding, they're achieving, they're summiting, they're doing amazing accomplishments just with Sherpa teams, no Westerners. It's really, really powerful. But we needed a Sherpa team to support us. And the Sherpas can be superstitious because, hey, like blindness, is that like a bad omen, right? Should a blind person be standing on this sacred mountain? Will it bring bad luck upon our lives and our villages, right? Then there's this one guy, Ampa Song, who had climbed Everest, I think, twice. And he said, I think we make our own karma. I think we create our own destiny. And he signed up. And then all the other Sherpas signed aboard
Mm.
because he had that courage to do that. And I remember on the South Summit, which is a fall summit before the real business, it's before you climbed back down and head over this knife edge ridge, up the Hillary Step, and then do the last 30, 40 minutes up this exposed ridge to the top. I couldn't see my oxygen bottle screen, of course. And I asked Ampasong, do you think I have enough oxygen to get to the summit? And he looked and he said, yes. And I said, just double check one more time. You sure? He's like, yes. And this is a guy who probably had like a sixth grade education. And he knew that if I fell down and I couldn't get up again, he was probably going to be there with me and he might die himself. And so he was connecting his fate to mine.
Mm.
And sure enough, we summited and got down safely. But I just thought that act of courage is so insanely beautiful.
Yes.
And so because of that, my wife and I were thinking of a place where we wanted to adopt a kid, and we picked Nepal. And my son Arjun, that's a whole story in itself. My son Arjun is 23 actually, and he's about to graduate Arizona State University. So we're really proud of him.
I know the story of Arjun and your love and the difficulty of bringing him home and the difficulty of bringing him back to his original home and learning about his mom and everything else. It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So, Eric, as we move toward the start of the climb for our audience, as this podcast begins to move toward its conclusion, talk about No Barriers. I want to make sure that people understand the work that you're doing today. It's something bigger than climbing mountains in my mind.
Well, as Pasquale said, like, what's greater than Everest? As I was coming down the trail, I was thinking about that. And, of course you want to keep climbing and climb harder things and what's the next adventure. But, really, I teamed up with two guys that were my heroes. Mark Wellman, who was the first paraplegic to climb El Capitan. I mean, he did 7,000 pull-ups up El Capitan to get to the top. And this other guy, Hugh Herr, who's a double leg amputee, amazing phenom of a climber. He climbs with these little prosthetic feet wedging them into seams and cracks. He's incredible. And so I got to climb with those guys, and I realized, like there's something to be learned by people who have been shattered and have figured out kind of a map of how to kind of reclaim their lives, sometimes how to move in new directions, to rebuild the map of their lives and build this new mindset of possibility, right? And I thought there's a lot to be learned there. And so No Barriers became the result of that. And our mission is to help people with challenges, with disabilities,
Right.
break through their own personal barriers and cultivate a mindset that enables them to move forward in a new way. And so we have all kinds of amazing programs and experiences to help people do that. We've worked with thousands of people, from youth to veterans to people with disabilities, to caregivers, people who take care of those with
Yes.
injuries or disabilities. You know a lot about great caregivers, right? And now we're actually, in the next year, we're going to begin a chapter model where we build chapters around the world so that people can experience the content and the programming and this what we call the No Barriers life. And we're really excited about that. So
I'm so glad that the highest peak you climbed was not Everest.
and it
And
was
ultimately not by yourself, Eric. And the cool thing is, man, it's in front of you still.
oh,
Like
yeah,
as big as the climbs have been that you've done, 7 peaks on 7 continents, and rafting through the Grand Canyon, man, a couple 100 miles plus. Like the things you've done are crazy. They're wild, over the top.
sure.
And yet it's the example you have now serving as a Sherpa for those who are struggling in their own way that I'm far more impressed by. It's incredible. For someone right now who is in a place in their life where they're stuck, what's the encouragement you might give them? It's a that relationship broke apart, finances are a train wreck, their health is falling apart on them. Whatever's happened has happened, and now they're in darkness. What would be your encouragement for them?
Well, I mean, one, I think you talk about this too. I think we call it something a little bit different, but like I think it's exactly the same thing. It's like a say yes policy, right? Like nobody's going to come save you in your basement, right? Like so when people present opportunities, when they say, "Hey, come have lunch with me," "Hey, come for me rock climbing at the climbing gym," "Hey, let's take a walk together," right? Don't shut them down. Say yes, even though maybe every part of you wants to say no, because those yeses become momentum and become catalysts to bigger and bigger changes that you want to make in your life. I also think, in the same respect, like take a step and just join something bigger than you, right? Like volunteer, volunteer at your kid's school, become a Boy Scout or Girl Scout den leader. It doesn't really matter what it is. Join an organization like yours or No Barriers, right? Like take a step that's concrete, because that's going to lead to bigger and bigger things. So yeah, it's and that first step is the hardest for sure. And I just forced myself to say yes. That was saying yes to a lot of amazing things and some stupid things too. You only learn that by saying yes.
Yes, I tried to climb Maroon Bells once with two of my friends with a pair of tennis shoes and no gear.
Yeah.
So we spent the night on a mountain one time in Colorado in the wintertime. We've done some stupid things by saying yes, but you're right. The next right step leads to the next right step. So we have 7 questions, my friend, as we move toward the finish line. They're called the Live Inspired 7. Quick questions, quick answers. Here we go. Number 1, you're a big reader. What's the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh, back to a book that I read my master's program when I was learning to be a teacher. It's The World According to Garb. One of the characters says, like, hey, your life is like a bunch of rooms in a house, right? And all those rooms have different furniture and they're decorated differently. But the windows are open and fog is blowing into the windows and filling all the rooms. And that's the tapestry of your life. That's the connecting thread of your life. And that taught me a lot about speaking and writing, is like, what are those tapestries that like weave through your life that become part of your mission and your MO and, your sense of purpose, right? Because life's pretty disparate and your life feels disparate. And so finding those connections has been really beautiful and fun. in my life.
Mm. What's one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a kid growing up, but you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today? So you used to be this person and you've lost a little bit of it as you've aged.
Gosh, I don't really think I've lost anything really. I think I'm more grateful today than I was ever, you know? If anything, I think I'm more grateful today when I look back on so many things. And I think gratitude is like a, you know, not only is it a good thing just for your mindset, but it's a great thing if you want to kind of succeed in life as a strategy in a way, because if you're grateful, people are going to take you under their wing and they're going to show you the world.
Mm. If your home caught fire and all living things are up, but you have an opportunity, Eric, of running in and grabbing one item, something that really matters to you, what's that one thing you would grab?
Oh, I grabbed my guide dog, my beautiful guide dog named Xena. She's so beautiful. I guess I'd have to grab my cat Birdie too, though.
All right, so pretend the cat and the dog and your partner and your children, everybody's out. All the animals are out. Grab one physical item. What's that thing you would grab?
I don't honestly, I can't think of one thing. There's not one thing I really that can't be replaced. That's like a material piece of thing. I'm a collector of experiences. I could care less about anything because like I wear the same clothes that I've been wearing for 30 years. It just that's anything possession wise is not important really in my life. So I think I wouldn't really care, you know? I mean, like people say, "Oh, what about those beautiful photos?" I can't see those. They're all in my memory.
That's a beautiful answer, not only for people who are unable to see, but for those of us who can. Like, grab the experiences rather than the things.
Yeah.
If you could sit on a bench, you don't do much sitting, but if you had to sit on a bench for a minute and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be seated next to?
I mean, I lost my mom way too young.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was 15. So yeah, I would love to reconnect with my mom. And you know, because you know that's trauma, you know, when you lose somebody so young. So I would love to have gotten to know her as an older woman, and I would have loved for her to have been there, seeing me off for college and my first job and all my you know accomplishments, blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean, like that's always been like a little bit of a wound that doesn't quite heal.
And I think in researching your story, I thought a lot about her and how proud she would have been to be in that plane with your dad and brothers,
For
looking
sure.
at the one guy facing the wrong direction, waving at the plane overhead, like this boy who I'm sure, because I understand when you were diagnosed and when they were sure that you were going to lose your sight, that the person who took it the hardest wasn't the child who was losing his sight, but his mother. That your mother kind of thought like, oh
Yeah.
gosh, like what will become of this child? And
Yeah. And
look
then
what
she
became
blamed
of this
herself
child.
sometimes too, you know. She's like, what did I do to,
Yeah.
you know, to have created this, you know? And so I know she lived with guilt, you know, and in a way that's not bad. It's just it was heavy for her, but my parents never really coddled me. I
Yeah.
think it was a similar for you. They just shoved me out into the world and then I'd get shattered into a million pieces. Then my dad or my mom, I guess, would sweep me back into the dustpan, and my dad would kind of rebuild me and kick me in the butt out into the world again. And so it
One
was,
of my favorite stories about your dad is you were almost completely blind. You could barely get a bike. You get on a bike. You should not have been riding on a bike.
no,
You could barely do it.
no,
You were doing jumps,
yeah,
and the color of the jump was too similar to the asphalt below it or the concrete
yeah,
driveway. So instead of saying, "Well, don't do the jump anymore, kid,"
yeah,
your Marine father comes outside with paint, paints the jump a different color, so that way you could continue to make these jumps and crash upon landing.
yeah. And that's possibility. My parents taught me that, right? That's like thinking in this beautiful, innovative way, pioneering way. And it can be so simple. And, you know, a kid's success so much, you know, depends on that attitude of your parents, right? Like because you take on their own ideas and possibilities, sometimes their own fears and their own barriers. And my dad really launched me into the world in so many great ways. In fact, when I was a little kid and I was learning how to ride a bike, and again, I couldn't see that well, and I finally got up and started biking it alone with my dad, like running behind me. But I crashed like a bunch of times. So I came home and I was covered in blood. And I was like, Mom, I learned to ride a bike. And she just looked at my bloody body and was like, ah, just ran me to the bathroom, started mending all my wounds, probably giving my dad, really dirty looks.
Erik, what advice would you give yourself at age 20? So at age 20, what did that kid need to hear?
I would just say that, like, to that kid is that, like, look, like, your life is is where it's supposed to be at 20. Yeah. At 20, you're not supposed to know that much. You're not supposed to have your life locked in. You're not supposed to have that map completely
Mm.
built, right? There's so much uncertainty. And the future is the adventure part, right?
Yes.
It's exciting, right? To have all that uncertainty in front of you and be in that stage of being able to build the life and the friendships and the community and the mindset that you want to build. I think it's like having I call it a vision, but it's like having like a set of values that you can put into action
Yeah.
that kind of become your light that leads you through that dark storm, like that light the way for you, so that you kind of have this faith that you will emerge on the other side, not just like broken a little bit less than you thought, but actually stronger and better. I would love to have reinforced that at 20 and just so that you feel that.
Well, my friend, question number 7 of the Live Inspired 7 is, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. Erik Weihenmayer, how would you like your one sentence to read?
I don't know if my life can be wrapped into one sentence, but I will say this. There are a lot of people, young kids, let's say, who struggle and question what their life can look like. And if they can see somebody like you or me succeeding in this incredibly unlikely way, then that gives them courage and gives them faith that they can, do something amazing with their life, that they can live in the current and not on the sidelines or in the eddy. And that's beautiful. That's a great legacy. That's enough.
Erik Weihenmayer summited the highest mountains in the world and taught the rest of us that we can too. And Erik, I so appreciate you, man. And thank you for teaching us how to cast a far bigger vision for our lives. You are a gift, man, and you blessed us today.
Thank you, John.